Alright guys, we're going to be replacing the front and rear shocks of my wife's 07 Liberty today. I got these shocks, really good price. It was about a little less than $200 on Amazon. It came with all 4 shocks and springs for the front. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual shock. Alright, so here's the shocks that I got. 2 of these guys for the rear and 2 of these guys for the front. The reason why I went this route is because the vehicle has 160 on it, and I just felt it was easier just to replace the whole thing, and wasn't that much more expensive to get a whole kit than just trying to replace the shock and putting the spring on and dealing with all that other stuff that goes along with replacing the spring, which isn't that hard, but it does take time. So $200, I think it's well worth it. So what we're looking at for the rears is a part number. If I can show you this. Right there. Okay, and it's actually made by Detroit Axle is the company. Okay, here's the Amazon part number. Okay, and then for these, you're looking at that part number, same company, Detroit Axle. Okay, so what we're gonna do today, I'm gonna start with replacing the rears, and then I'll move to the fronts. The rears should be fairly straightforward. You just got upper and bottom bolts. The fronts, you're gonna need to remove the battery tray and a few other, well, of course the battery, a few other items in there just so you can get to these 4 bolts on the driver's side, and then on the passenger side you should be able to reach these 4 bolts and reach the bottom as well. So let's go ahead and get things torn apart. Alright guys, so while I'm doing the shocks, I'm going to go ahead and rotate the tires. And all I'm going to do is go front to back, and then once I rotate them front to back, I'll take the back ones and rotate them left to right, just so the front ones would be running backwards on this vehicle, just to get a better tread wear on it. So on the shock itself, you're going to need 18 and a 15, okay, for those 2 bolts right there. I don't know if you can see those. Yeah, those 2 bolts right there. So we're gonna go and get the tires off, get those rotated, and then I'll start in on the shocks. Alright, so once you remove the bottom 2 bolts, the shock will actually come down. It may be slow, it may not come down at all, depending on how worn up your shocks are. Then you come to the top one. You have a 15mm nut at the top that you got to take loose. Once you loosen that one up, the shock will just drop out, and then you can slide your new one in. So we're going to go ahead and take that out and put the new one in. Okay, so when you put the new shock in, go ahead and put the top bolt back in. Leave the strap on. Do not cut these straps. Okay, you want to make sure that you're on the correct side of all your brake lines and electrical, whatever you have going on there. Okay, come down to the bottom. Now you're going to want to cut this, and hopefully you're going to slide this bolt in to that hole as it comes past. Now if you don't, it's not a big deal. You just have to get a jack underneath it and push it back up, and then you can put the bolt in. So it shouldn't come down that fast, but it will come down fairly quick. Now the reason why you want to leave that one loose is so you can guide it into the bottom holes, otherwise you won't be able to move it around. So let's go ahead and get that strap off, and then try to get this nut in, or excuse me, this bolt right away. If not, then I'll get a jack underneath it. Alright, so I wish I had the video going when I did that. It went right in, no problem. Got the bottom in, I'll put the nut on. I'm going to cinch the bottom down nice and tight, and then I'll cinch the top down, and then I can go ahead and remove the strap just by cutting it. Basically all I did was slide it off the end, and at that point I was able to maneuver it into the 2 slots here, or the 1 slot. So one trick when you're tightening back up, you can get your 18mm on the nut, then you put your 15 on the inside of the bolt and let it rest against the axle. Okay, then you don't need to hold on to it, and you can put all your torque onto the other one. Alright, so the proper way to put these on would be to torque them, top and bottom ones. I've never had any issues. You just tighten them down good and tight, and I've never had any issues with them backing out. But if you want to find the correct torque, you can just look online. Like I said, just tighten them down so they're good and tight. You should be good. So we got the driver's side rear shock down. We're gonna go ahead and do the rear shock on the passenger, and then I'll start in on the front. All right, I got both rears installed. Everything's tight. One thing to note, you wanna make sure that the bigger end of the tube is upward, and then the lower end is the tube that goes inside that upper tube. Other than that, tighten everything down and put your wheels back on, you're done with the rear. So let's move to the front. All right guys, so when you get your box in of all your parts, you want to make sure that there's a right shock, you'll see the R, and a left one. The left one's going to go on the driver's side, the right one's going to go on the passenger side. So it's as if you're sitting in the driver's seat, okay? Reason for that is because the bolt pattern changes on either of them, okay? So left is on the driver's, right on the passenger's. So to get into your passenger side shock, you can actually see the bolts down there, okay? But in order to get in there, you got to remove your air cleaner. Really easy to do. You just remove these clips. Now's a good time to clean your air cleaner if you don't ever clean it or need to clean it. Okay, just go ahead and set that aside. Pull your air cleaner. This happens to be a fairly new one, but it could get cleaned. I might just run it through the water as it is K&N. And then this box here should just pull right up. There's a couple rubber clips underneath that's probably holding it on. I'll have to get two hands on it and yank it up. So once you get that out, then you can get to all your bolts on the passenger side. Alright guys, so it's probably a good idea to get about a 2-foot breaker bar for this. Makes it a lot easier. And then an 8-inch to 12-inch extension, and then you're gonna need an 18mm socket for these 4 bolts on the top. Okay, that'll take care of the top. Let's move down to the bottom. When you do the bottom, you're gonna want to take this horseshoe off, okay? But before you do that, you want to remove the horseshoe from the shock, and then you're going to remove the horseshoe from the car. So you're going to loosen up this nut right here, which is over on this side, and it's actually a 16mm nut, okay? Once you have that loose, it's easier to do on the vehicle than off the vehicle. Then you're going to take this bolt off down here, okay? It's got a lock washer on this side, so it holds the bolt in place. And then you're going to use a 13/16 socket on this side at the bottom of the horseshoe, okay? So let's go ahead and take the top off, and then we'll work our way down. Alright guys, so now that I had all the bolts out, this bottom horseshoe looking thing, you just basically need to get a pry bar in here and pry it off of that hole. Then your shock will actually drop down, okay? Once you have it drop down, then you can remove this off of your shock, okay? And then maneuver it out of your A-arms. Alright guys, so I got it out, got this horseshoe unit off. One thing I didn't show you guys is I actually had to tighten down the shocks again on these two, suck it up so I could get this horseshoe completely off, okay? So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna take the new shocks, take the nuts off, slide it in place and tighten those bolts down, and then I'll work this horseshoe back on the bottom, and then we'll get that bottom pin back in there, okay? So let's go ahead and get the shocks slid back into place. Now, we'll just slide them in. You're gonna come in through this spot right here, up and in, and then just put them through the holes, and then you'll have to reach around the fender to put the nuts on. Alright guys, so I forgot to show you this little secret when you're pulling off this horseshoe. This bolt comes through on this other side here, okay? Goes into these threads here and pulls it tight. But if you were to take that bolt, flip sides, put it into the left side, or whichever side has the threads on yours, and then you put a shim in here just so it doesn't go back through the other hole, and you can use that to pry this gap open. And by doing that, it actually allows you to slide it into place and put it back on the shock and attach this bottom bolt. Same goes for removing it. If you do that, it'll allow you to just slide it all the way off, and you can get it off a lot quicker than trying to hammer it off and you know, just force it off basically. So this is just going to spread the collar open enough to where you can slide it back on. Alright, so once you got the horseshoe back on, slide your bolt all the way through, and then put the other side nut on. And then you can remove this and your shim, flip it around and tighten that back up, and you're done. Same goes to the other side as well. You want to make sure you tighten those bolts in the top, tighten everything down, and it's good. Alright guys, so I tightened everything up, made sure I torque those guys down or tighten them down. Got my air cleaner back on. Now I'm moving to the driver's side. And this side you're going to want to remove the battery and the battery tray. In order to remove the battery, it's really simple. First you got to remove the cables. And then there's one bolt down here. I believe it's usually 10. Take that whole assembly out. It's a little plastic assembly, and then the battery will come right on out. And then there's 2 bolts holding the battery tray. In some cases, in other cases, it may just be a snap-on, kind of like the filter on the other side. So we're gonna go ahead and get that removed so I can get down to the bolts for the shocks. Okay, so once you have the battery out and the battery tray out, everything else is the same. You can see that there's a pinch collar there, and the horseshoe you got to remove. Everything's the same. So go ahead and remove that bolt, put it to the other side and screw it in, and then put that washer in to spread it, and then remove the bottom nut. It's the same as the other side, so we're gonna go ahead and get that removed. Alright guys, so once you have the battery out, there's 3 bolts that are holding on, which are 13 millimeters. There's one in this corner, one over here in this corner, and then one down in that little gap right there. Okay, 13 millimeters. Once you get those out, this tray should just pop right up. If not, you might have to remove a few electrical components. We'll see how it is on this vehicle. Alright guys, so it's up to you if you want to remove this. I'm going to go ahead and just tilt it back enough to get to those bolts and these bolts. We'll see how that works. Should be just fine. So let's go ahead and get those 4 bolts removed and get that shock out of the hole. I already have the other stuff removed, so it's pretty much just dropping it out and putting the new one in now. Alright guys, so just make sure you've tightened everything down properly before you put your battery back in. I've gone through and tightened everything. Battery's installed. Wheels are back on. Just got to get it off the jack stands. Tighten those lug nuts and then take it for a test drive. So thanks guys for watching. I hope this helped you. Okay, so when you put the new shock in, go ahead and put the top bolt back in. Leave the strap on. Do not cut these straps. Okay, you want to make sure that you're on the correct side of all your brake lines and electrical, whatever you have going on there. Okay, come down to the bottom. Now you're going to want to cut this, and hopefully you're going to slide this bolt in to that hole as it comes past. Now if you don't, it's not a big deal. You just have to get a jack underneath it and push it back up, and then you can put the bolt in. So it shouldn't come down that fast, but it will come down fairly quick. Now the reason why you want to leave that one loose is so you can guide it into the bottom holes, otherwise you won't be able to move it around. So let's go ahead and get that strap off, and then try to get this nut in, or excuse me, this bolt right away. If not, then I'll get a jack underneath it. Alright, so I wish I had the video going when I did that. It went right in, no problem. Got the bottom in, I'll put the nut on. I'm going to cinch the bottom down nice and tight, and then I'll cinch the top down, and then I can go ahead and remove the strap just by cutting it. Basically all I did was slide it off the end, and at that point I was able to maneuver it into the 2 slots here, or the 1 slot, excuse me. Alright guys, so just make sure you've tightened everything down properly before you put your battery back in. I've gone through and tightened everything. Battery's installed. Wheels are back on. Just got to get it off the jack stands. Tighten those lug nuts and then take it for a test drive. So thanks guys for watching. I hope this helped you.